Hello, this is Margarita Monet from Edge of Paradise, and you are listening to the Metal Pit Podcast.
Welcome to the Metal Pit Podcast, where we delve deep into the albums and bands that shaped metal. Please visit our website, The Metal Pit, www.themetalpit.org, where you can find album reviews, interviews, and live show reviews. Also, follow us on Facebook and Instagram at The Metal Pit. And our YouTube channel is youtube.com at The Metal Pit 666. And I also have an Instagram for the podcast, which is at the Metal Pit Podcast. So please follow that. That was just started a few weeks ago. And you can email me about the podcast at podcast@themetalpit.org if you have any comments or suggestions, or maybe you want to be a guest on an episode. And also, if you're on Spotify, I've just created a Metal Pit playlist featuring new metal tracks and tracks from albums we review on the website. So if you're on Spotify, check that out. And today, my guest is a new friend, Adam Pearson. How are you today, Adam?
Oh, I'm just doing swimmingly great in this hellacious thunderstorm and lightning that's crashing down around me outside right now. I'm pretty amped for this, man. I've been looking forward to this all week.
Good. Yes, our writer, Stacia, or our contributor, maybe I should say, because she doesn't really write. She talks and videos and things like that. Stacia recommended you for a podcast, so I let you pick the album, and I had to listen to it for the first time, but we'll get to that. We'll get to that later, even though I guess people already have read the subject title, so they already know what the album is. But anyway, I wanted to ask you about you. I know you're in a band that maybe isn't a heavy metal band, but you want to talk about your band and what kind of music you guys play.
Yeah, sure. I play in a band called Night Chill, where we all dress as it is, we all dress like it's like a 60s occult style with like corpse paint medallions and capes. But we don't play metal, but there is like a metal influence, like especially with our guitar playing, because our guitar player like is like crazy about like doom metal and black metal and Merciful Fate. And but we play like but the music itself is like we built everything around a theremin. So we
Mhm.
started building all these songs around using the theremin as like a voice. So it's all instrumental music, but everything is like, dark horror occult stuff, but sometimes like it'll be like a bit lighter. Like I kind of say like we're sort of like a newer version of like 45 Grave or a band like that.
Mhm.
But no, we have like a lot of fun with it, and it's theatrical. We bring out the candelabras and have a projection with different like clips of old horror movies in the background.
Oh,
And
that's cool.
no, we have so much fun doing this band. We recently had our 4 song EP finally came out on vinyl, Cryptide, so that's finally out now. And now we're still recording a whole bunch of new stuff. We have some songs coming out in some short movies and things like that coming up. So Night Chill's keeping it pretty busy. So
And do you have are you on Spotify or anything like that yet? Or
yes, yes, we're on Spotify. We're on Bandcamp. Was it bandcamp.com /Night Chiller, one of those things.
okay.
There's Instagram, there's Facebook. We're on YouTube because we actually have videos up where we're getting into mischief in the cemetery all the time, or getting in one our video for Burial Ground, we get killed by one of the Blind Dead from those return, Spanish Blind Dead movies. Because my one of my bandmates made a whole costume because she played a Blind Dead in a recent film filmed in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
So we figured why not put the costume to use and have us all get murdered by one of the blind dead from Tombs of the Blind Dead.
That's cool. And you used to write for some horror movie web scenes, is that right?
No, I wrote for actual zines.
Oh,
So we
actual
used to
magazines.
photocopy. Like I've probably like written like all sorts of garbage online, but like none of it like most of it in comment sections. But no, we used to
Mhm.
have like horror zines. So we would compile everything together, and we had different contributors, submitting artwork, submitting reviews, doing little articles and stuff. So I used to write a lot for that. It was called Invisible Invaders, which is why my other nom de plume is Adam Invader, which is if anybody's ever looking for me anywhere online, that's who you're actually going to be looking for is Adam Invader. Adam Pearson is only somebody that like sort of kind of exists on Facebook, only because they make you put your real name.
Yes. Okay, that's cool. Anything else you want to say about yourself before we start?
Well, dude, what do you want to know? I can tell you, I can talk all day about me, but why don't we could talk about you, or we could talk about this album.
Well, we don't need to talk about me, but I do actually. I
But
want to. I'll ask you one question before we get to the album and the band. When
sure,
did you get into heavy metal music in the first place? Like
I
what band
I
or
can
album? Or...
I can tell you exactly how I got into heavy metal music, and I'm sure this is a pretty common story you hear all the time. I had a reprobate older cousin. So my older cousin was like really into like Metallica, I'd say probably around when Master Puppets came out.
Mhm,
And I remember when one came out because I'm in my early 40s, right? I remember when one came out in the album Injustice for All After. I remember he'd always like because he'd watch us all the time, right? Because he was the older cousin, so he'd always be like noodling around trying to play one on my dad's guitar all the time. And I
mhm,
remember he'd always have music videos playing because we had cable, he didn't have cable. So then I was watching the Power 30 and the Power Hour all the time because that's what he was playing on TV. So I started
mhm,
kind of getting exposed to those bands that way. And he was like the cool older cousin, so we all looked up to him. And I remember there were days where he'd bring his Walkman by and he'd be like, "Hey man, you should listen to this." And it would be whatever cassette tapes that he had, and I'd stick them on my head and just like listen to them and bought my head around along. I was probably like I don't know, like 8, 9, 10 years old. And then from there, I just because like I said, we had cable. I grew up in like a tiny town in southwestern Ontario,
mhm,
so that was kind of how you found out about anything. Either you watched it on TV or you had somebody that was like a cool older cousin or a friend or somebody expose you to stuff. Because like the only stuff that was weird, that was mostly around or even anything even quasi metal that people I knew were into besides that like was either the glam stuff like Guns N' Roses was riding high.
mhm.
um Poison, believe it or not, was still holding court until the mid 90s, well into the grunge era in small town Ontario. You couldn't get away from like Trans Am's full of goons like driving around listening to that stuff all the time. So
Well, I had a
Def
Camaro
Leppard
for a
and
couple
Rat,
years.
like that, it never died there. In fact, I think it's still on its second, third, possibly even fourth life in those towns.
Well, probably not
Dudes
just
driving
those
Monte
towns, but
Carlos, blasting this stuff out, weed smoke flying out the windows.
yes. Okay, that's cool. If you want to know how I got in heavy metal, you'll have to listen to one of our
I
different
do,
podcasts.
but I'll have to listen to the
Well,
podcast because you've
I'll
already
just
told
say
that story.
it was the Number of the Beast album was the first real heavy metal album I ever heard. And I saw it in Circus Magazine. You remember Circus Magazine?
I actually have a pile of circuses from that time when that
So
album
do
came
I
out.
still.
I got from another friend of mine, his cool older brother had all this stuff, and he was like, "Do you want any of this stuff?" So it was like piles of Crangs, Circus, Hit Parader.
Yes, I
So
have some of those.
I still have them all. I remember there was like even one from Toronto called Metallion, I think it was, and I
Yes,
have issues of
I
that.
have a couple of
And
those
then
too.
I have like a ton of like old Rip magazines that came out later on,
Yes.
Metal Edge and all that stuff. Like I don't throw anything out. If I ever get to come back, I can get the dang video to work next time. I'll show you this. I have like get this, and this is a bit of a sidetrack. It
Hmm.
has to be the best thing I've ever seen in a metal magazine. It's an issue of Kerrang that has a photo comic with John Michael Thor from Thor, like
Hmm.
fighting with Kronos from Venom in a ruins of an English castle, and they're having a battle, and then they just put like comic book words coming out of their mouth. It is the most absolutely ridiculous thing I've ever seen in my life, and everybody needs to know this exists. It has nothing to do with Judas Priest, but it's like still absolutely fantastic.
No, that's cool. And yeah, I read a story about Iron Maiden. I didn't even hear it. It was my birthday, like the next day or something, that I had this magazine. and it sounded cool. So I told my brother if they have this at our local record store, which there's no record store anymore in these small towns because my town was like
No.
5,000 people. But so he went, I said, either get me this or get me John Cougar Mellencamp because I used to listen to the radio. And
Hey,
luckily
me
they
too,
had
man.
Iron
Like
Maiden.
I have some embarrassing mixtapes somewhere that I hope my parents lost in a move that will never
Well,
surface.
I think I still have some K-Tel records here. If you
Hey,
remember
man, those
K-Tel records.
I have the KTEL the it was like one of the truck driving
Uh-huh.
8 tracks. I still have that. I think Super Bad's kicking around, and I think I have like a Gene Pitney one that has an autographed picture of Gene Pitney in it
I don't know who
because it's
Gene Pitney is.
ridiculous.
Okay, okay, that's enough of that old talk. Oh
All
no, it's
right,
not enough of the old talk. We're going to talk about Judas Priest. But
that's right.
okay, first, okay, does anybody not know who Judas Priest is? Of course, they're an iconic English heavy metal band originated in Birmingham, England in 1969. I was 3 years old at the time. Let's see. Of course, they've sold, not of course, but they've sold over 50 million albums worldwide. Of course, being around this long, there's been a lot of member changes. But during the 70s, the core was bassist Ian Hill, Rob Halford, of course, Glenn Tipton and KK Downing on guitars, and a different drummer every year. Maybe not quite, but then Dave Holland
No,
joined.
it's true. I went through their Wikipedia and it was literally a different drummer every year.
It was kind of like Spinal Tap, I guess, maybe. But anyway,
Yeah, they just too much power. They blew up.
but Dave Holland joined them, and he was the drummer for 10 years, from 79 to 89. I'm not going to go on about that. Of course, Halford left for in 1982. Tim Ripper Owens took over for a few albums, and then Halford came back again. But I'm not going to get into all that stuff. How many did I say? How many albums they had? No, I didn't. I probably didn't write it.
No,
I think I got probably what 20. I forget. I didn't. I don't see it in
it,
my
yeah,
notes.
it's a lot. They started getting pretty prolific when Halford came back again. So
Now, or first I'll say how I first when I because I always ask how you where you first heard the group that we're going to talk about or the album. So I'm going to go first. So the album we're going to talk about is Sin After Sin, their third studio album. But for me, I think the first time now sometimes it's hard to remember back then. I mean, I remember when I first heard Iron Maiden, I just told you about it, and I remember when I first heard Metallica and other stuff, Slayer, things like that. But Judas Priest, even because I was a big Iron Maiden fan, and then I discovered Judas Priest after that, so I was
yeah.
still leaning more towards Iron Maiden. I like Judas Priest, but not as much as Iron Maiden.
Oh,
But
don't even,
so I think the first time I
yeah, me
heard,
too.
I think the first time I heard Judas Priest, I think I had a mixed cassette. I thought it was called Guitar in the '80s or something like this, even though this is before the '80s, the album we're talking about. But it had their version of Green Manalishi and the Two Prong Crown on it. And I thought,
Oh,
oh,
I
fuck,
love
I
that
love this
song, man.
song. And so so I think I went out and got the album that was on, which was Unleashed in the East, a live album. So I think my first Judas Priest album was a live album, which is kind of odd to start listening to a group with their live album. But I think that was the album I first heard of Judas Priest was that one. And I didn't really, I went back, I got British Steel, and but I didn't get the one we're talking about, Sin After Sin. I didn't have that because I actually preparing for this podcast is, I believe, the first time I've listened to the album Sin After Sin. But I've
Okay.
heard a few of the songs because they're on Unleashed in the East. I think three of them or maybe four of them. But anyway,
Yeah,
so that's
because
when I
yeah, they were still
first
in the
heard.
set list at the time.
Yeah, so that's and they still play some of them today, or well, yeah, today in their live sets.
Yeah, I
They're
think
on
four. I think
YouTube.
four. At least four of them will float. Like two of them always, and then two others will come back in and out.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, that's when I first heard Judas Priest. So how about you? When did you first hear Judas Priest or this album?
So the first time I heard this, well, Priest, I'd probably heard Breaking the Law on something, right? But I was
Mm-hmm.
pretty young when they were really in their heyday, right? And like I'd probably seen a couple of the videos on Power 30 or Power Hour, but like didn't really like register, right?
Right.
Later on in the 90s, like my whole thing with like metal, because we talked a bit about this like before the podcast, where I've always kind of been a little bit one foot backwards when and terms of what was going on. And it's not that I don't love contemporary stuff, and I didn't then, but in the 90s, which was a really kind of weird time for metal, especially some of these older bands, like I was into some stuff that was going on at the time, but I was kind of always looking backwards.
Hmm.
So I
Yeah.
was like really into like really into Black Sabbath, which would like wasn't the coolest thing to be into in like the mid 90s in high school.
Hmm.
Um, it was like kind of like dinosaur, like that was like your dad's music, right? Or for people of that age.
Yes.
So I always loved vinyl records. I have ever since I was young. I just and but I love all the imperfections about them. Like I know a lot of people are like, oh, greater audio quality. For me, it's like a whole nostalgia thing where like I love the scratches, the bumps, the pops, the hisses. Like I love the size of the artwork. I love flipping the records. I love that you like yeah, you can like jump the needle around if you really want to, but it kind of makes you listen to the whole album
Yeah.
as it was all laid out as the band's intended it to be, right? For good or
Yes.
ill. And sometimes you end up listening to some lesser stuff, but at the same time, it's like, you give it a chance as where cassettes were a little bit like that too, but you could always fast forward a cassette like pretty easy,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Like records are and vinyl, it is not a convenience format. Like you can't carry it
Hmm.
around. You can't bring it to school. You got to be in one place and listen to it. Like, and if you got to be in one place and listen to something, you got to pay attention to it.
Yes.
Like it's there. So at that time, like our turntable was like busted that my parents had. Somebody broke the needle and then it just sat there collecting dust for ages. But I started getting really into collecting like vinyl records because at that time nobody wanted this stuff. So I was always like finding stuff at garage sales or flea markets and I was like, wow, I can get a whole box of stuff for like $2 and they're all like albums I want to hear. So
Hmm.
I begged my parents one year for Christmas, because what kid in the 90s is begging their parents to get them a turntable? I don't know, but I was one of the few. But the thing was, they never got me a receiver. So what I ended up having to figure out how to do is I figured out I could put the TV on the AV channel and I could turn the family TV into the receiver so I could listen to my records, but play it, but the audio would all be through the TV.
Yes.
So one one summer day I because I was like a total nerd, so I was always at the library or I was always out wandering around and stuff like that, and there was this garage sale and I'm like, cool, there's a whole bunch of records and the whole box was full of like Ozzy, the early Ozzy Osbourne solo albums, Judas Priest albums. I believe there were two comps. One was called Metal for Breakfast, which we actually should talk about that someday because Attic Records put it out. It's an amazing comp. And then some other metal, and I don't remember what it's called, Metal Madness or something like that. It has some good stuff on it, but Metal for Breakfast has like bar none the dumbest cover you've ever seen in your life. It's fantastic. So the Judas Priest albums that were in that box, there was the best of, so that was like stuff off the first two records because there's a whole deal with that. I don't know if you've talked about that on any of your other earlier podcasts,
No,
but
I
they
don't
lost
think
the
so.
rights to all that stuff. So
Oh.
that early record company that they were on could just put out as many best of comps with those songs because they own the rights to that stuff. So
Yeah.
that was in there. Sin After Sin was in that box. Jugulator was in that box. Um, and I can't remember if there was a fourth record. So the first record, because the cover of Sin After Sin has this like amazing like mausoleum Egyptianite mausoleum on it. So I'm like,
Hmm.
oh, this is gonna be like a really awesome album. So that was the first one that I played the whole album all the way through, and I loved it then, and I love it now. Now a
Hmm.
couple years go by, I moved away, went to art school in Toronto, and I got super into like punk rock and hardcore, and it's not that I didn't eschew my metal roots, right? Growing up in small town Ontario, I still like the stuff that I like. A lot of the late 90s stuff that like I really tried. My friends loved it. I gave some of it a chance. I kind of just some of it I can maybe still play. Some of it I'm not as into. And that's not to say there's anything wrong with the music. It's just taste
Yeah.
change, right? But like I got really super in because I always like thrash. So through thrash, I fell into like hardcore and early punk rock and stuff like that, and which is still a lifelong obsession for me. But I worked with this guy who's still a good friend of mine. His name's Chris. He grew up in Scarborough. He was a bit older than me, and he was like super super into metal back. Probably he's around your age.
Mm-hmm.
So he started bringing in a lot of the albums that he loved. So those early Maiden albums, all
Mm-hmm.
the early Priest albums, early Scorpion stuff, which like I love that stuff because I only knew like their 80s stuff, right?
Yeah.
And then Sin After Sin, he brought that back in, and I hadn't heard that since, even though I still had the record sitting in my apartment, and we just play the whole thing at work because the way it worked is everybody got a turn on the CD player because it was I worked in this like kind of rock and roll print shop, right? So everybody that was to keep the music fair, right? And the whole deal was nobody could crab about anybody else's music. You could play whatever you want, and everybody got a turn, which I thought was a pretty cool democratic system, and it exposed me to a lot of awesome stuff that like might have been out of my wheelhouse, but I'm extremely glad that I was exposed to it. And it
Yeah.
wasn't that this would have been out of my wheelhouse because I own the record, but
Mm-hmm.
I was just really like jazzed to hear because I was getting the like because I was like Maiden obsessed. So I was starting
Mm-hmm.
to kind of and Motorhead always like Motorhead
Yeah.
has always been like a constant. So I was kind of starting, and he's like, okay, if you like that stuff, he's like, do you know much about like the British new wave of heavy metal, or even the stuff before that, like UFO and Priest, which predate that. I think even
Mm-hmm.
Budgie predates that too.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I don't really know a whole lot about it. So he started bringing stuff in all the time, and then we listened to it, and then I'm like, okay, like I'm totally feeling this. And like I said, I still play this album all the time. And years later, I ended up moving to Hamilton, and there were two guys that I worked with that really got me back into metal, which were was a and still friends with both of them. A guy named Dan, who was he was a younger guy, but he like loved like 80s metal. And
Mm-hmm.
we had the same system in the shop because it was a different print shop. Everybody got to play their own thing. So I really started, and even stuff that I kind of like didn't really get into as much. Like I got pretty obsessed with a lot of stuff, and he loved a lot of Priest. He loved thrash, and some of it I hadn't heard it in forever. So we'd play this all the time. And then another guy who was he was a little bit older named Chuck, and he loved all this stuff too. So he was always like playing this. So it's like so stuff like all the Priest stuff. I probably see up to Painkiller. After Painkiller, I kind of drop off, and
Mm-hmm.
that's not to slag the band. It's just I just like what I like, right?
Yes.
So, and this album was always one of them because there were a bunch of songs on here that I really liked, and they were still in the set list. And what extra cemented it for me beyond that, the first cut was the deepest. Sin After Sin was that first cut.
Mm-hmm.
It was an album that I really connected with friends that I still like think the world of. And as far as I'm concerned, like I always like when somebody's got good taste and they're exposing you to something like that, that's always something that sticks with me. Like it
Mm-hmm.
just makes it a little extra special, even if it might not be somebody's favorite album, might not be an album people play all the time, but like it really makes it mean something to me. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And this is one of those records. Like I can still bust this thing out of my collection and look at like the front and back cover. I love the artwork.
Mm-hmm.
I love the production on it. I really like this. Although there is an outlier song on the album, we will get to that, which I still think is like a weird fit. But like having done a little bit of background reading, I understand. I think why it's there.
Okay.
We will talk. Well, we will talk about it.
Okay.
But
Let's.
but yeah, that's kind of like how I fell into Priest in general and Sin After Sin in particular, which like those early albums, like everything before Killing Machine, there's songs people know, but
Mm-hmm.
I unless they're of a certain age, it's hard for me to necessarily gauge whether any of those albums are anybody's people's favorite albums. Like you always hear British Steel, Screaming for Vengeance, even Staying Class, right? Because that's Staying Class, the album that came out after this. They're getting into one. They're going kind of more towards the Judas Priest that we know them as.
Yeah.
And Killing Machine, aka Hellbent for Leather, is Judas Priest as they've always exist. That's the template for all Judas Priest that was to come after that.
Yeah.
Was that album,
Yeah.
barring some of their fun synth adventures in the '80s, but that's a whole other story for a different podcast, I'm sure.
Yes, I don't even know if that'll make it to a podcast.
Well, you're not a turbo lover?
No, not really. I don't know. Maybe it'll appear in my since we're doing our top 10 Judas Priest songs. I don't know. Turbo Lover might make it, and who knows?
You never know. You got to
But if
stick
people
around to the end
listen
of the
to
show to
this,
find that out.
if people listen to this podcast regularly, there's two songs on here I don't really like at all, and I'm sure they can guess which two they are. And one is probably one you already mentioned, but we'll get to that in a minute. Yeah. Anyway, okay, so Sin After Sin, just briefly again, even we're talking about it, released 1977 on Columbia Records, produced by Deep Purple bassist Roger Glover, and I didn't know that till today. And it was
Well,
the
yeah, and that
band's,
was a kind of a cool time for because Deep Purple was I don't even think they
yeah,
were going concern anymore at that time. I think Rainbow was what Blackmore was doing then,
yeah,
if that even.
yes. It was the band's first major label debut, and the only album to feature drummer Simon Phillips, who was replacing the original drummer Alan Moore. I'm not sure how if he played on the tour. I don't know anything about that. I didn't see that part about the tour or anything. But
I think they went through other session guys on it for the tour from what I was doing in my own reading there.
okay. So anyway, now we can, oh, I guess I'll just name off the lineup, even though I already named four of these, I think. But of course, Rob Halford was on. Did I already say this? I don't think I did. But the original lineup, yeah, featured Ian Hill bass, Glenn Tipton, KK Downing, Rob Halford, and as I just said, Simon Phillips on the drums. And I guess three of them are still in the band, right? Halford, Tipton, or is Ian Hill still in the band? I forget.
I think he might be. I know KK has been in and out with
Yeah, he has his own bands
whatever
too.
he's had going on in the last while.
Yeah. Okay, so
I don't think
let's
it's a bad terms thing. I think it's just maybe just the road's hard, man.
yeah, and maybe you don't want to play. You've got another thing coming every night.
Well, yeah, right. Like when you start getting into the hits tours, but
Yeah.
that's probably a whole subject for a whole podcast on its own.
Yes. Okay, so let's get to the album. And it starts with Sinner. And I'll get you to start every song. And if you have anything that you didn't say, but I don't think you're gonna have anything I need to say. So
We'll
tell
see
me what
about
you
that.
like about
Hey,
Sinner.
if you want to chime in, you can. Hey, by all
Well, I
means,
know, but
because
I'll let you go first and you're the
all
guest.
right, I appreciate that. That's so courteous of you. All right, so Sinner being the lead track and is still a mainstay of Judas Priest set list to this day. Um, Incredible song, 6 minutes long of nonstop, unrelenting Rob Halford vocal insanity. Um, I really love. There's a I think it was like Long Beach in '82 or something like that. There was like like a whole live concert filmed. Like I could be wrong about the location, but like that like if you can ever see like live versions of them doing Sinner from
Mhm.
around that time, it's absolutely incredible. Like what that man can do with his voice and Sinner is an amazing showcase for that. Like I love this song. This is a tape that like I put in I would like back when my car still had a tape deck, which shockingly wasn't as far back as you'd think. Um, this was an awesome song to drive around to. Like Sinner
Mhm.
is a solid song, and I'm not shocked or surprised that it is still in the set list to this day. Um, just everything about it. Like it doesn't feel like a 6 minute long song or however long it is. Like
Mhm.
it it really goes, man. Like it's a great way to kick this or any album off. But I don't know what more I can really say about Sinner because like I think this song speaks and screams for itself.
It's kind of I don't I guess it's maybe I don't well I haven't listened to Judas Priest since Painkiller myself either. I haven't listened to
Yeah.
anything, I don't think. But it's probably kind of odd to look maybe not back in the 70s, I guess, when you had Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple and groups like that. And yes, they're playing long songs, but it's kind of odd to start an album with an almost 7 minute song. But yeah, it just flies by. And what this there was something I was gonna say because I was just looking at what album is this one? Oh, their second album. They started that album with Victim of Changes, which was almost eight
Which is
minutes
a
long.
pretty long song too, and an incredible song. Well, the cool thing too about like Sinner, as opposed to some of the other songs that are kind of later on this album, like because one thing I kind of want to say about Sin After Sin too, because I know I talked to you a little bit about this, but this album really comes at a time where, because we're still in that, like, we're getting out of the proto metal stage. Heavy
Mhm.
metal is starting to kind of take its shape and form from, the ether of music, but it still has like one foot in the prior hard rock stuff, like, like your Deep Purples, your Led Zeppelins, your Black Sabbaths. Like, it still has one, even your Blue Oyster Cults, right? Like, it still has
Mhm.
one foot in that world, but songs like Sinner and some of the later songs on here start having a foot in what's to become the future, with like new wave of British heavy metal, and even like stuff that would influence thrash later, because that is actually one really relevant thing I want to mention about this album. This album is one of the first ones to have a double kick drum,
Mhm.
and it's one of the first ones to use 16th bass notes, right? And where that's important is much later on, in when thrash starts happening, even like later British wave and thrash, because that
Mhm.
stuff was all about double kick drum, or somebody like doing double time on a single kick drum,
Yeah.
like to get that tempo and pace up. But like a couple songs on here have their foot in the future, and a bunch of them have their foot in the past, and in different places. Like, it is a weird record. As we go through the songs, we will totally like go over that.
Well, speaking of weird, I find it weird that the second track is a cover song, and it's
Oh,
a
not only
Joan.
is it a cover song, it is a cover song of a Joan Baez ballad. And
Yes,
not only that,
which
but it's a Joan Baez ballad about her relationship ending with Bob Dylan. If you've ever listened to the original, it's a beautiful, heartfelt song.
Mhm.
Um, if any metalheads are thinking about busting out some Joan Baez, you want to get the tears flowing, I highly recommend putting on Diamonds and Rust. It's a great song. In general, apparently Joan loved the Judas Priest cover of Diamonds and Rust,
Mhm.
and like, it's their version of it. It's really powerful. It's still, this too is still in the set list to this day.
Mhm.
Like, this was their first big hit on their first major label album. This was the song that broke them. This was the song that got them a US tour. So without this weird Joan Baez cover, like, who's to say that Priest would have become the phenomenon that they did? But this is a song that like started charting them up the UK charts. It started to get people interested in them. Um, it is like, Halford really and the band really give it their all. It is a really heartfelt song. They have to change a bunch of things in it to make it fit the title. It's actually, shockingly, despite the length of Sinner, I
Mhm.
believe it's a much shorter song than the Joan Baez original, because it takes out a few like specific things about like her relationship to Bob Dylan, but like kind of generalizes it into being like that general song about like love and loss, and having that like familiarity with somebody. Like, this is like, it's a total breakup song, man. Like, and it's still like, like for anybody going through that, this is like a total great song to put on your breakup mixtapes. Um, Still holds up. And a funny thing too, I remember, I don't know if SOD did a goof on it back in the day when they did the Speak English or Die record, where they
Mhm.
just did like, it was like 5 seconds long, Diamonds and Rust, like near the end of the album, goofing on this.
Well, I can't say I've ever heard the Joan Baez version either, or this
It's
SOD
you know
version.
you know what, like, it's not like I'm not necessarily busting out the folk music, but I was inspired to, because we were doing the podcast. I knew some Joan Baez stuff, but I was like, all right, I'll give this a listen, just because I got to talk about it. So you got to immerse yourself in where it came from. And I was like, I'm not gonna lie, I had some sand in my eyes. It was, I got a little weepy. So, but it's almost like when Priest did their version. It does have a bit of a different tone. It has a little more like defiance to it.
Mhm.
Like, there's still some sadness, but definitely a little more defiance.
Yeah.
So, but I think, again, and it's so well done that I think that's why it still shows up on best of comps. It's still in the set list. People still respond to it, and it opened doors for them. So,
Yes.
in their canon of music, even though it might not be a song that like isn't as, didn't get as big as Breaking the Law, which was their real big breakout song, or
Mhm.
Stuff Off Screaming for Vengeance, or anything that came later. Like it's still a pretty important song in their discography.
Yeah. Okay, then we
And I
go
don't know what.
to. Oh, sorry.
No, no, I think I said everything. I was going to say I think I said everything I can really say about that one. But it's still worth a listen. Like to anybody who hasn't heard this record, like
Yes.
it's definitely one of the standout tracks worth playing.
Yes. And then we go to Starbreaker. I'll just let you start with this one too. Starbreaker.
Starbreaker is a total driving song. Like that's always what I've thought about it. I've always associated this song with like just driving around, driving fast, driving late at night. Like it's just kind of, a really cool rock and roll song. I don't remember if it was on any of the Metalworks comps because we used to listen to those in the car all the time too. When they
Hmm.
did that, like the two well, it was probably a two record set, but I always call it a two cassette set because that's how I knew it.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's just like it's a pretty cool, fun song that way. I think this one still creeps its way back into set list like once after the reunion days.
Hmm.
They'll still bring this one back every once in a while because people really responded to it. Like it's still like I almost just sort of classify like a hard rocking song. I don't really know what any, if there's really any deep of any meaning to this as like say Diamonds and Rust or some of the other songs. But I think it's
Hmm.
just, it's just an awesome like rock song and you can play it, pumps you up. Maybe not as much as delivering the goods off Hellbent for Leather, but it'll
Hmm.
still it still gets the job done.
Now, actually, I heard this song first when Arch Enemy covered it,
I didn't even know they did. That's incredible. I'll have to check that out.
but it's Arch
Because
Enemy with.
I always love hearing like covers of Priest songs, but by other people doing their own like I don't know if you know Enforcer at all, but they did an awesome version of Tyrant. That's like
Yeah, I think I
like I
read
don't think
that
it's
somewhere.
recorded on anything. I've only ever seen live versions of it, and it's incredible.
Mm. Yeah, well, the Arch Enemy, it was when they had a male vocalist, and so
Oh,
it's
way
more.
back, way
Yeah,
back
it
then.
was one of
Okay,
their. It was probably on one of the first couple albums on the extra songs, or I don't know if it was on the album or if it was an extra song. But then Arch Enemy a few years ago, they came out with all their extra songs that they have, so it's on that double
yeah,
album or whatever too. But of course, you
okay,
can probably find it on Spotify, I'm assuming.
yeah.
But yeah,
I've
so that's
yeah,
my
I
when I
managed to find all
first heard
sorts of
this song
rarities.
was
That's
by
for sure.
Arch Enemy and a guy growling the vocals, like death metal kind of vocals or whatever. So that's how I knew the song first was that one. And today
Well,
was
hey
probably the
man,
second
all I
time I've
got,
heard this.
because everybody's got opinions about covers, and mine is because like my even my band, we have a bunch of covers. It's like take it, make it your own. Like
Yeah,
do
yeah.
your own weird thing with the cover, have fun with it. Like some people, hey, they can bust out earnest covers, and I'm not knocking anybody that does a tribute act because like that's a lot of fun, and those some of those acts are like fantastic musicians. But for me, it's always like take if you want to do cover, like do something interesting with it, right?
Yeah. Yes. I'm sure you'll find that one interesting for
Oh, I bet
sure.
I will. I no, I like the Arch Enemy stuff that I know. So,
Yeah.
but I didn't know that they ever did that even in the early days.
Yes, they did. Okay. I don't know if they ever played it live. I mean, I didn't see Arch Enemy till Angela was a singer there, so I'm not
Right.
sure what they did with Johan Leva, I think is how you pronounce it. But yes, he was a singer on that. Okay, then we get to one last, even the title bothers me. But anyway, Last Rose of Summer.
And
And I
this
don't
was
have any.
originally
Oh,
the last track on the first side of the record or cassette back when
yes,
things had sides to them.
yes.
Last Rose of Summer, because I know we chatted a bit about this, is a total outlier in this band's discography. And it's not that they don't have other ballads, because they do. Like Before the Dawn on later albums is like that's a fantastic ballad. I think that's a great
Mhm.
ballad. I can't necessarily say this song sounds to me. This is definitely the influence of the producer because he was the guy that convinced them to do Diamonds and Rust.
Mm-hmm.
Roger Glover was the guy who was like, hey, maybe you guys should think about doing this song. And they must have been familiar with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it must have been either pressure from him or because it was the major label debut. Like, hey guys, we need something radio friendly. We need something, maybe not, dial back that Birmingham tough metal thing. We need you to show, and it does show their range, right? I will give
Yes.
them credit for this. Like but this song is definitely like a definite foot in their past. And it sounds to me, it's like a radio friendly 70s AM AOR friendly ballad. It's perfectly serviceable for what it is, but it's like it just seems to me like Judas Priest was going after some of that Captain and Tennille money, or it's as close to yacht rock as Judas Priest is ever going to get. And I hope they're not. Nobody ever hears this and gets upset if this is their favorite song. It is not my favorite song. In fact, it is probably one of my least favorite songs. And to me, and if you're playing this album on Spotify or if you're playing it on CD where there is no breakup in the flow,
Mm-hmm.
it really throws the flow of the whole thing off. Like if you're listening to it start to finish with like no breaks on a disc, this
Mm-hmm.
totally messes the flow up because it's like slow, meandering, it's treacly, it's like almost maudlin.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not without its charms, but it sounds totally like it was another band or it should have been for another band. Like I'm maybe whoever wrote it, it really meant something to them. Like maybe they wrote it about their partner or it really they really wanted to express that love, that love and feeling. But
Mm-hmm.
like I really wish they hadn't.
Well, it said it was wrote by Halford and Tipton, but that doesn't really help. I don't know any other
But
details.
again, maybe they just were feeling a lot of pressure with this being their major record. Well, that's the thing, like putting this album out because they weren't really happy with the deal they had with that prior record label they had, and they got the offer. I think this was CBS Records put it out. Well, I know
Mm-hmm.
it is because I'm looking at the tape, and anytime you see an early CBS Records thing, it always has that big chromium dioxide thing right at the bottom of the cassette.
Yes.
And the deal with that was is they lost all the rights to all their early stuff. Like so, imagine taking that leap from 1969 to 1970. So you have almost 10 years of your work that you just gave up to make this record. So I'm sure there was definite pressure from CBS where they're like, we're gonna invest money in you, but we want a hit.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they thought this was gonna be that hit because even like if you listen to some later early British new wave heavy metal like 45s, there's
Mm-hmm.
like a whole bunch of them where like the second side sometimes is almost like this slow ballady song, and it's like, what is this? I'd even and this isn't to knock Maiden, but even like Remember Tomorrow almost seemed like an attempt for that too. But which
Mm-hmm.
is Remember Tomorrow is a way superior song. So that To Last Rose of Summer, we won't. That's a whole other kettle of fish we won't get into right now. But this song totally like throws the flow off. It is weird. It is probably one of the weirdest. And I've heard some weird Priest songs, but this one takes the cake, man. And I won't necessarily, this one will not be ever be on my top tens lists, but maybe for somebody it was really special. Maybe it's they played it at a slow dance back in 70s 77 78, and that's how they met their wife. It's a special song to them, and I say, hey, more power to you, but this one's not for me.
Well, I just checked out the website setlist.fm that shows songs played live by bands. I'm not sure how
Okay.
accurate it is, but I just looked and it looks like they've never played this song live.
Yeah, that's what I found too. Because I found a couple of them. It mentions they stopped doing them live in 78.
Mm-hmm.
And then this one, I guess, was they've never done it live. And you know what? Let's hope they never do. I don't think the audience,
Well,
a paying
uh,
audience, deserves to have that inflicted on them. Okay.
well, I'm sure they won't do it now because it obviously didn't become a hit or anything like that. Like maybe
Well, that
Roger
and there's like
Glover.
so many other things. Like that's the thing. Like they have like how long are their shows? Like they have so much stuff that people expect them to play now.
Yeah, I'm sure people wouldn't even know what the song was if they played it.
You know
Like,
what? And
what's this?
it's
What
it's
album's this song on?
Yeah, well, an album that has all the other songs are good, pretty much good except for this one. That's what album it is. And that album is Sin After Sin, which is what we're talking about right now.
Okay, let's
All
flip
right.
the album over and we're on to Let Us Pray slash Call for the Priest because we start with an instrumental and then go to Call for the Priest, which is a little, this song is like way faster than the last song, right? So what do you think of
Oh,
this
this
two
song
songs?
is definitely Priest. It fits in great with the album. I love the instrumental lead into it. Um, it did like I did in the little bit of research. They retired it after a little bit after they were doing the live shows for supporting this album. This one I think should come back maybe once in a while. Like it is but it is pretty with the instrumental lead in it is pretty long.
Hmm.
But I think it's a pretty awesome song. Like the all of side B, I think is flow wise a much stronger side or flow than the first side. Um, I if I were rearranging some of the songs on this record, I might arrange some of them in a different order.
Hmm.
But yeah, Let Us Pray Call for the Priest is like a totally because I always associate it as one song too, even though yeah, Let Us Pray is just is the instrumental. But
Yeah.
no, I think it's like a great, you know, fits in really well. It still has a little bit of that foothold to like like their earlier days a little bit, but it is much faster. We're starting to, you know, feel that Priest that we know or the one that we still know to this day.
Yeah.
Um, I'm you know, considering the song title too, that's why I'm also kind of, you know, it's like, okay, this is kind of odd. This doesn't come back in because it's almost like you're, you know, you're throwing part of your band name in there too, right? So
Mhm. And I tried to read some lyrics and stuff to it, but it's not really clear about if it's about call for the Judas Priest or or if it's about religious
I
priest. It doesn't really, I don't know. The lyrics probably weren't
I
that
think
great.
isn't it wasn't it about like a death or an execution, I believe.
I don't I don't know.
I think that's yeah, that's what he
I
was
don't
singing about. It was like like somebody's dying and that's what, you know, it's about it's a, you know, I think it was about something like that.
well, I look at a website where people give their interpretations of the song, but I think this
Yeah, I
one
know those ones.
everybody had a different idea, so I thought, well, I don't know that. Because sometimes it makes sense, but this one was a little bit unsure. So anyway, then we go to Raw Deal, and
Raw
I'll let
Deal
you
is
go.
actually when I was first re-listening to Raw Deal because I hadn't listened to it in a little while. It kind of reminded me a little like subject wise like Gangland by Iron Maiden or
Mhm.
Laying Down the Law by Cloven Hoof. I don't know if you know that song at all, where you know it's all about this like, you know, clandestine crime stuff going on, and you
Mhm.
know the raw deal is like somebody gets betrayed, and that's kind of how that was like how I always listened to it. That it was like, you know, a crime caper song and totally a lot of fun. I was doing some reading on it, and I didn't realize that it has a second life as like a coming out song.
Mhm.
And Halford himself is gone on record as saying it's like a heavy metal like gay rights anthem.
Yeah.
And if so, like that's I think that's awesome too. You know that it can be different things to different people, and that it can also have that type of life to it as well. Because I do know that was, you know, definitely always a thing that he lived with, and it was didn't even really come out and be open about it until he was in two, the band that he had in the 90s, like the industrial metal band,
Mhm.
where, you know, in retrospect, it's, you know, okay, we kind of get it now when, but he couldn't, you know, it was definitely not a thing that like people could openly talk about for a long time. And especially in the metal world, which does, you know,
Uh,
I'm not saying it's not progressive. It's just, you know, it's just different, man.
yeah. And if they would have announced it, if he would have announced it, I guess back then, I don't know how it would have affected their
Well, have you ever
career.
heard of you ever heard of Joe Bryant?
No, I don't believe so.
So after both like the glam rock days and like, you know, David Bowie flirted with it, there was a musician called Joe Bryant, and his record label marketed him as like the first like openly gay pop star. and the people were just like merciless, and it really, really, like, he was a talented musician, and it really, like, people were just not kind about it at that time. They weren't open-minded. Like today, I like to think that for the most part we're much more evolved, and but then it was pretty serious stuff, right?
Yeah.
So that's like cool that, like, there's songs like Raw Deal where Halford felt like empowered as he could be to put things out there that, like, people that could understand what he, maybe knew what he was saying. They could hear what he was really trying to say. Whereas, because I'm maybe a little more clueless, I'm like, cool, this is like a Crime Caper song, right? Not realizing that there could be other subtext to it.
Yeah.
So it was cool to re-listen to this and to do a little bit of research, because, like, then I'm learning more about, like, stuff that I've heard over and over and over again. And it's
Yeah.
just like, oh, okay, I never even stop to consider this, or other perspectives on stuff, for a second.
Hmm. Now, and
But the
it
song
says
after
there.
this is like Here Come the Tears. This
Uh-huh.
song I think it was an incredible song. I really like this song a lot. I was actually like playing it over and over again. I thought it had like a great build up to it. It kind of gave me like the same vibes as Victim of Changes. Not as
Hmm.
long, but just where it
Yes.
has like a real build up to it.
Hmm. And I guess it's more of a, would you call it a power ballad then? Not like the other song on side one.
I would
It
say this is
starts pretty
definitely, oh,
slow.
this is definitely a power ballad. I know this song, like, it's not one that I don't think they played live since the 70s either.
Hmm.
Um, Last Rose of Summer is like a total ballad. Like,
Yeah.
it it's not even, I wouldn't even say it's not even a rock ballad. It's just it's like we're,
Yeah.
Last Rose of Summer is like, very, there's no power in that at all.
No.
But it's fine for what it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, here come the tears. Like, again, it kind of flows well with Diamonds and Rust, where they're, I don't know what was going on in these guys' lives at this time, but it's just seems interesting that you have quite a few songs that are like either like love lost, um and the recovery from that. So I don't I haven't necessarily dredged up those interviews to necessarily know, or if they've even been open about that, because it,
Yeah.
it seems to be the same, Halford and Tipton for most of the songwriting credits,
Yes.
and lyrics and things like that. So whatever somebody was going through, like it does, you can really hear it on Sin After Sin, where, like, there's triumph, but there's also heartbreak, and like Here Come the Tears definitely, like, it's, again, it's like a defiant heartbreak, not dissimilar to Diamonds and Rust on the other side of the record, right? Like, it
Yes.
is it is like, I really enjoyed the song, like, personally, and I think it fits really, really good with kind of how the flow is. I probably would have put it closer to Diamonds and Rust myself, or even if you really had to stick Last Rose, you could even like do it Last Rose, then Diamonds, then Here Come the Tears, for the total, like, destruction of a relationship trifecta on this album.
Yes. Yeah, I'm not a big ballad guy, which everybody will know from, and even though it's not a ballad like the one on the first side, but still. Now, again, this is the first time I listened to the album. I've heard a bunch of Judas Priest albums, and I'm going back and listening to this one. So it's going to be different, especially when this was your first Judas Priest album, right? Full album.
Yeah,
So,
too, like I said, like, it is a really unusual time for the band. It's at an unusual time in British history when this came out, 1977. Like,
hmm.
a lot of this, like, like the early hard rock and proto metal, yeah, it sold, but like it wasn't what the music press wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
Like, there was a lot of tension, a lot of economic strife in England. Um, Punk rock sucked all the air out of the music press. That's all anybody wanted to talk about in the UK was all that stuff.
Yeah.
I don't even know if anybody was even talking about this album when it came out.
Yeah.
I don't even know if anybody talked about it in the state. They must have talked about it a little bit in some of the mags in the States if they were able to get a tour. But like they were touring with like Foreigner and REO Speedwagon. Like think about that, man. Like
Hmm.
Judas Priest is supporting REO Speedwagon and Foreigner, like hot-blooded Foreigner, man. Like that just seems like an odd fit to me thinking about it in retrospect. But when you hear some of the stuff off this album and then the earlier albums, you kind of hear it because it just that's just what happened with bands that got like heavy metal was still not quite heavy metal yet.
Yeah.
So it all kind of got lumped into hard rock, which just basically meant you had loud guitars.
Yes.
So I guess it kind of sort of makes sense, but it kind of sort of doesn't. But you can even hear that like with early Scorpion stuff, like it sounds different than what they were doing later on with the big arena sound, right?
Yes. And I'll apologize to all any REO Speedwagon fans that are listening. Um,
There's nothing wrong with REO Speedwagon. There's nothing wrong with them. They're totally fine. They're just not what I choose to listen to by my choice.
yes, I'm sure there's not too many fans of REO
Then
Speedwagon.
again, then again, I'm talking up Here Come the Tears. So like my taste is as subjective as they come.
Okay, then we finish off the album with Dissident Aggressor, and I'll let you start again.
Dissident Aggressor, this is the shape of Priest to come. Is this song. Like
Yeah.
this is a powerful way to end the album. I'm really glad they decided that this is the way they were going to do it as opposed to some of the more ballady songs. It's ending it on an extremely triumphant note. This is
Mhm.
when I was talking about the double kick drum, this is a song you can really hear it. Like when
Mhm.
you're listening to Stained Class, you're listening to Hellbent for Leather, you're listening to British Steel, Screaming for Vengeance, it all has the roots in Dissident Aggressor. That's where Priest were going. Um, and it's kind of like everything before this on this album is where they came from. That was where they were in the past as musicians and songwriters. Dissident Aggressor is like I'd probably say definitely one of the heaviest songs on the record. Like
Mhm.
it is heavy metal, or at least heavy metal existed at that time.
Mhm.
Um, Fantastic song. This song is still gets played all the time. It's still
Yes.
in the hits comps all the time. Like I believe you'll still hear Dissident Aggressor live like pretty regularly if you ever catch Priest. Which I still haven't, sadly. It just every single time something falls apart for me and it just doesn't happen. But one of these days while they're still on the road, it is gonna happen because I heard they put on a hell of a show. But like I still love Dissident Aggressor. Again, this is to me like songs like Sinner, Starbreaker, Dissident Aggressor. Um, this is what makes this like this is a record I can drive around to, man. Like
Mhm.
it wasn't I know I'm riffing on things that other people have said. Like the best way to determine if an album sounds good is if it sounds good in your car while you're driving. Like as much
Yeah.
as I love vinyl records, like I'll just sit here and listen to records all the time because that's just what I like to do. And like for people that were teenagers in the 90s, like I don't know how like I know now tons of them that were collecting records, but it wasn't cool. Like owning vinyl wasn't cool.
Yeah.
Like buying old dusty records from flea markets wasn't cool, man. Like I was pretty nerdy about this stuff, but I'm like it's like, hey, I'm finding all this stuff and I don't even know what it would have cost to buy this stuff on CD back then, but I definitely did not have that money. So it scratched that itch and like I said, I had to learn to get creative to figure out how to make a receiver out of a TV so I could listen to this stuff. And that's what I did. And again, that's why like I said, sin after sin, I like I said, I still play this record. Not just because I'm like, okay, I need to talk about this or this isn't
Mhm.
one people haven't talked about yet. Obviously, I have a lot to say about this album because I've been rambling on about it for such a long time now. But like, I think it's an incredibly important record in their career because it started showing not that earlier albums didn't have those indications of what this band could do, but even with the the ballad that we lovingly kind of poked a little bit of fun at there, this record I think shows a whole lot of their range as musicians,
Hmm.
where not every song sounds the same. And that's fine, but it's a showcase for what they're capable of doing as songwriters, how far they're willing to push their boundaries on certain things. Like who's a bunch of tough guys wearing leather. That's going to be your first hit, a Joan Baez cover, like gentle Joan Baez, the hippie folk singer. That's what you're gonna. But then again, they did it later on with Green Manalishi, which was a Fleetwood Mac cover. Well, back when Fleetwood Mac were more of like a psychedelic blues band type thing.
Yes.
But both fantastic covers, and like I said, they it stood the test of time because if they're still playing it live, people still want to hear it.
Hmm.
And I
Oh,
think
and
we've
that's
covered all those. The only other song that I think was like not on this album, I just want to mention it really briefly. I think it
yeah.
might have been like a B-side to a single, was Race with the Devil, which shows up on like the CD versions and the Spotify version of this
Hmm.
record. And only because not only is that a super fun, awesome song, that's got a great flow to it, but Girl School later covered it on one of their albums. I love that Girl School version. I don't know if you've even talked about Girl School on some of these shows, but like somebody needs to talk about Girl School because more people need to know about Girl School. I love Girl School.
Well, I know about Girl School, of course. I'm not sure if they have an album that we would do an episode on, possibly, but I know they've
Demolition,
been
man.
mentioned before. Pardon?
Demolition's a fantastic record. Like total new wave of British heavy metal.
Yes.
Kelly Johnson was a great guitar player.
Yes.
But I think
And
more
that,
people only remember them for the when they did the Motorhead Head Girl St.
yeah,
Valentine's Day Massacre record,
yeah,
which is still fantastic, right?
yes. But yeah, I had Screaming Blue Murder and Play Dirty or whatever in those albums
Play
because
Dirty's good.
they were
Yeah.
one of the only female metal bands back then. Like there wasn't very many. Like the Runaways
Hit
were
and Run
quite a
was
few.
a hit. I liked Hit and Run a lot, but yeah,
Yes.
Demolition. If you only got to play one record by them, Demolition's the one.
Well, we'll maybe do that episode one day. Maybe we could get one of the girls from Girl School.
You never know.
I see
They're
they're
still
on.
playing to this day.
They just released an album either this year or last year, and yeah, they're on tour.
I
Surprisingly.
hope we're not running out of time.
No, well, there is no time. Well, there's no time limit, but we'll get
Oh,
moving.
nice. All right.
I
No,
just don't
man.
want people to
That's the thing.
stop
I know
listening.
I know. Hey, I know I can talk, and I'm actually quite enjoying this because it's like this is just cool for me to like not only to revisit, but also to like do a little bit of digging on some stuff I didn't know about. It was
Yeah,
inspiring to like really spend some time with these songs, and some like because like some of them I listen to very regularly, some of them less so. Like I said, this was a really awesome. So thank you for inviting me to do this. I really appreciate that.
you're welcome. We're not done yet, though.
Oh, I know we're
So,
not done, but
so we
I'm just so appreciative that I got to say something right now. I don't want to
okay,
not say something.
okay. Well, you're welcome. Okay, so you
Thank you.
mentioned during that you've never seen them live, so there's nothing for you to talk about there then. I think,
Well, yeah, I know. The closest I've got is I used to work really close to the Molson Amphitheater, so I'd hear them because I used to work near there. But for whatever reason, it was just like some conspiracy of fate that I'd always like. It wasn't a good time, or something else was going on the same night,
yeah,
or just whatever comedy of errors always happens. So I have not had the opportunity.
I
But
if
one of
I
these days,
remember
I will remedy that. Sorry,
if I remember correctly, I think I only seen them live once.
when was
Uh,
that?
well, I'm trying to think. You know, I know Helix opened up for them.
Oh
The
wow, yeah. Can
uh,
Canadian Pride of Helix there.
so I'm not sure if it was. I don't think it was Screaming Revengeance because that was earlier. Could have been Defenders of the Faith, or it could have been Painkiller, possibly. But yeah, I can't remember the year. I'd have to look it up to see if I could find when Helix opened
Ram
for
it
them.
down or
Because I
no,
think it
point
was
of
on
entry was
C.
before that.
It could have been, yeah, it could have been Ram It Down too, I suppose. But I think it was at the CNE in
Turbo.
Toronto.
Defenders of the Faith is a great record too. If
Yes.
somebody hasn't talked about that, they need to.
Yes, I think that's probably my favorite one, actually, Judas Priest album. But anyway, we'll
That
get to
was
that.
that was the other one in the pile. That was the second one I listened to. So
And so we didn't rate the album yet. Let's just what would you give this out of 10 if you had to rate it?
I think if I had to rate this album for I'm gonna say for me it's an honest 8, but I think there's a little bit of a boost up just because I have a lot of personal nostalgia that maybe other
Yeah.
people wouldn't.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
I know that like they're the first album and Sad Wings and Sin After Sin, there's songs on there people know and people like, but I know that tonally they're it's almost kind of a different band in a way because it was
Hmm.
the early 70s.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I know that those aren't necessarily people's favorite unless like some people they love them, right? Like and I like those records a lot myself for my own reasons. Um I rated it as 8 like I said because of that. I think the album flow of songs maybe takes a point off for me because I think the flow could have been changed a little bit.
Hmm.
And I'm not going to take a point off just because the one ballad because hey man, if that would have been the song that would have broken them through, which is the only reason I think it's on there. Like Priest as we know it could have just like yeah, they could have been putting banging out the sister Christians and things like that in the 80s and that could have been the direction they went if that was a song they went. But Diamonds and Rust at least has that Priest flow to it. It has that Priest structure to it. So you hear it now and it sounds like Priest.
Yeah.
Whereas some of the other ballads they still have that foothold in early 70s rock, you know.
Yes. Okay, so for me, I only listened to it like today and maybe yesterday or the other day. So
That's fine. Hey, be honest. Nothing wrong with that.
I would give it like I'd say I'd give it a 6, but that's because I knew the other albums first. Like I knew the one with Hell Bent for Leather on it, whatever, Killing Machine or
Yeah.
whatever. I knew those ones first and Screaming for Vengeance. So now I'm going back to this one where, they weren't as heavy, of course, back then because it was 1977. So of course it's not going to be as high as the newer albums. So anyway, there we
No,
go. We're done with that part.
and that's hey, I think that's totally a fair assessment, right? Because
Yeah.
like and it's not that you're like you knew the songs that were still relevant on here. Like
Yes.
they're songs I'm sure that you hear, you've heard them, you
Yeah.
know them. They're fine songs, but like they
Yes.
like a lot of I guess what you call the B cuts. Those I can see them not necessarily being to everybody's taste
Yeah.
because yeah, exactly. It isn't like the Priest we all know and love, like it's Killing Machine all the way,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Everything from there onwards is what we know.
Yes. Yes.
Stained Class is much closer to that. Like Stained Class has a better flow because I really re-listened to like a whole bunch of them to just to really enforce that I know what I'm talking about too. Because I always like to believe that I do, but like Stained Class, I think was like that album flow was everything is perfect in exactly the place that I would want it to be.
Mm-hmm.
But the albums after that, like, and I, to be honest with you, I know a lot of people like go ape for British Steel.
Yes.
But I think honestly, like Killing Machine for me and AK Hellbent for Leather is the strongest album, and then I would put Screaming and then Defenders of the Faith, and then I
Yeah.
kind of knock the other album under that. Point of Entry
Yes.
was a little odd. It had like there were good songs on it, but just something about that album flow I just didn't grab me as much.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
I hated the cover art.
Of Point of Entry, The Road. Is that right?
Yeah, just the road in the rearview mirror. I was just like,
Okay.
especially in between like British Steel and Screaming for Vengeance. How boring.
Okay. Okay. We're gonna finish with our top. We're gonna do top 10, our top 10 Judas Priest songs. And I know it's kind of hard to rank them 1 to 10, whatever. But anyway, I'm gonna go first since you've been
Okay.
talking for a while. So I'll go first, and I'm starting from 10 to 1, just so you know. That's how I'm doing it.
Okay.
And I'll say what the album's on, but I'm not going to say much about the songs really. And I think I probably only have like 4 or 5 albums in here that the songs are from. And we kind of
Okay.
went over that just then. So number 10, I got All Guns Blazing from Painkiller, which was 1990, of course. Number 9, I got Screaming for Vengeance from, of course, Screaming for Vengeance, which was in 1982. Number 8, I got Breaking the Law, which was from British Steel in 1980. Number 7, I got Painkiller, of course, from the 1990 album. Number 6, I
Nice.
got Riding on the Wind, also from Screaming for Vengeance. Oops, laptop just disappeared on me. Sorry. Tagged out. What was that? Was what did I just say? 6. Okay, 5. I got Living After Midnight from British Steel album. 4, I got Hellbent for Leather from the Killing Machine album in 1979. Number 3, I got Electric Eye, also from the Screaming album. And I finish off with 2 from Defenders of the Faith. Number 2, I got the Sentinel. Sorry, reading it wrong. And my number 1, you mentioned during our chat about listening to songs while you drive. So you could probably guess my favorite one is Free Will Burning.
Nice. That's a great list.
And
My
I
list
did,
is weak.
and I like you've got another Coming is a great song, but you hear it at every hockey game.
Well,
So
there's so many. There's so many. Like that's the thing. This was a hard
yeah,
list to pick. I think we're gonna have a couple
yes.
similar ones, and then we're gonna have a couple that are we're gonna like I don't know, man. I just I like kind of weird stuff. So I'm hoping
Well,
I
I
get
didn't
all
like
my numbers right here.
yeah, so I wasn't gonna go back and listen to every album again and try to because there's like 20 or whatever there is. But I'm sure Ram It Down has some good songs on it too and things like that. But yeah, so it was kind of thrown together quickly.
Exactly.
So let's hear yours then. But don't worry, it won't
So
be oh, I forgot Turbo. Shoot, I left that off my list. Anyway, go ahead.
well, I love tell you what, Turbo will both be our number 11. How about that? Because I love it too.
Okay.
All right. So did you start from 10 or did you go to 1?
I started 10 to 1, if you
Okay,
wanted to do it
so
that way.
I think for these are not really in any real consecutive order because I just love all these songs
That's
anyways.
fine.
So it's always gonna be you could ask me on any day of the week and it's this is gonna change all the time.
Yes.
So for 10, I'm I'm today, at least today, is going to be the Green Man Unleash You with the Two-Prong Crown, which some days it could be 1, some days it could be 5. Like I love this song. It is a Fleetwood Mac cover, but it's like if I'm ever playing this song when I'm driving, which I was today, and it came on, I'm belting it out, man. Like I love the Green Man. It's like this weird psychedelic, strange song. If people don't really know it very well, it was written about Fleetwood Mac's original leader Peter Green, who like later had to leave the band because he had like a lot of like personal issues and stuff like that because he was like kind of an out there guy. Um, Fantastic cover. Diamonds and Rust was kind of a good template for what they could do if they were doing a cover. Green Man Alicia perfected it.
Hmm.
Um, let's see. Do I have a number 9? Number 9 is Victim of Changes. I love Victim of Changes. I love the build up in Victim of Changes. Like even though yeah, it's a pretty long song, it is an absolutely fantastic song. 8, Electric Eye, because that is to me the best way to like kick off an album. Or no,
Hmm.
yeah, like I love that song. I always love that. It's just really gets in my blood, gets me electrified if I ever hear it.
Hmm.
7 is Nightcrawler, which I think was on Painkiller. Like I just for whatever reason, I just really dig this song. I kind of go nuts for it. I love hearing it. Just gets me like when you hear Nightcrawler against something like Victim of Changes or earlier Priest, like it's a pretty heavy song.
Yes.
For number 6 is going to be the Sentinel off Defenders of the Faith. Like I love the Sentinel.
Hmm.
Some days I might even rate Sentinel like 1, 2, maybe even 3. Like
Hmm.
love the song. It also makes me think of the old horror movie, where the gateway to hell. So that's kind of where my mind's either always going to horror movies or things like that.
Hmm.
5 is going to be Delivering the Goods. This song gets me pumped up all the time I hear it. This was like a fantastic way to kick off Hellbent for Leather Killing Machine record. Like
Hmm.
this is like again, I keep saying this, and I've said this a whole bunch of times. Total excellent driving song. For and this is going to be maybe a little bit of a weird one. Tyrant, which I think was on like one I wanted was it on Sad Wings for Destiny, I think.
I'm not
If I'm
sure.
wrong, hopefully the metal police don't beat me with cue balls and socks. But I believe it was. I love Tyrant, like just kind of see a very epic
Yes.
song, and I do love that Enforcer cover of it. If anybody has never listened to that, that's also worth checking out. Um, three, I Diamonds and Rust, man. I can't get enough of this song. I think it's a fantastic cover. I would even tie Sinner with it. It was a tough choice between the one of those two songs.
Hmm.
But I really do think this song like just does it for me. Two, is another earlier song, the Ripper, about all about Jack the Ripper, like just because
Hmm.
I love the horror, all the horror elements to it. Again, this is a song that if I ever put it on a mix, I sing along when I'm driving in the car.
Hmm.
Just something about letting the blood flow on East London streets. I just can't get enough of it. And my number one is Screaming for Vengeance, man. Like
Hmm.
that song is incredible. It is usually always going to be close to number one. It is a fantastic song. And this isn't to knock like it was tough to exclude Breaking the Law. It's tough to exclude You Got Another Thing Coming,
Hmm.
Hellbent for Leather. Like it's tough to leave those songs off. I love all those songs too, but I wanted to kind of like throw a few in there that like they're my personal favorites. They might not necessarily be like ones that are everybody like I said, Tyrant's a pretty early song, and Victim of Changes, and those might not be ones that like are everybody's favorites, but like they're ones that I totally dig. But like Screaming for Vengeance is like that song is power. Like to be honest with you, get this. So when I bought my copy of what I thought was British Seal at a garage sale, tell you what, guess what I was thrilled about? The fact that somebody lost their copy of British Steel and slipped Screaming for Vengeance in, so I could listen to the song Screaming for Vengeance. That
Funny.
was awesome. I was like, this is the best dollar I've ever spent.
That's good. I was
That's my
going to say,
that's my
oh,
top 10. That's my top, and that's hard. That's a hard list, man. When you were like, because I know we talked a little bit about like I was like, oh, what because of course I got to be like, hey, teacher, let's make the assignment harder. To find other metal songs from 77. Very weird time for metal
hmm,
internationally. So I think you made the right call by doing a Priest top 10. I think that was a fantastic idea because I had to start thinking about like, okay, if I was going to start putting stuff in there, and also why do I like this? Because I think that's
hmm.
always an important component to a top 10 list is like I can name a bunch of stuff, but why?
Yeah. Yeah. 77 would have been hard to do 10 albums, at least that would kind of fit into
Or
heavy
even
metal.
10 even 10 singles because like 19 set you want to go to 78, 79, 79 especially easy, so easy. In fact,
Yeah.
I think Lars Ulrich did a whole two disc compilation with just seven songs from 79. It's you just picked 10 songs off that. They're all good, man,
Yes.
except for maybe Leaving Nadir by Witchfind. That's another ballad I could do without. But I guess maybe he liked it. Maybe he had a very fond moment,
Yeah.
meeting the love of his life in the back of a 88 Delta Oldsmobile or
Poss-
something.
Possibly. Okay, I guess we better end this since we did go a little long, I think, this time, which is
Oh,
fine, of course.
sorry. I'm
No,
sorry. I'm
don't
sorry.
say sorry. It'll
I was
be
having a good I was having a great time, man.
yeah, so that's good. That's why we do it. And I'm sure Judas Priest fans, and especially ones that like Sin After Sin, will love all the information you
All
gave and
all all
your
all 10 of you
thoughts.
will love this episode.
Oh, I'm sure there's more than 10. So I will thank you, Adam, for joining me. And
Thank you very much for having me.
we'll get you on another podcast episode sometime, I'm sure. Maybe get you on another guest or whatever. And
as long as I didn't wear my welcome out this time and I can get to come back,
yeah,
I'd love it.
you will. You will. You saved me from talking since I didn't know the album as well as you did. That's for
Oh
sure.
man, I'm just call me the oxygen destroyer. I can suck all the air out of the room. No problem.
No, you were great. It was great. Okay, so thanks for joining me, and thanks everybody for listening. Tune in again next week. Thanks and goodbye.
Have a good night.